The Museo ng Kaalamang Katutubo is a foundation undertaking museum development and cultural education. It assays various museological functions, being true to one of the two primary or central notions in our name, kaalaman. MusKKat's collection is a repository of both tangible and intangible heritage, and we explore and share these with everyone curious and interested in cultural objects, in processes of facture and accompanying stories and sundry information. One of the ways we share and interact is MusKKat's cultural brunch, entitled Usapin, Usapan, and delivered as a podcast. It is a venue for an informed and informative conversation between MusKKat, represented by yours truly, and one subject matter expert. Oh, by the way, my name is Corazon Alvina. Today, we have a conversation with Dr. Eusebio Dizon, archaeologist extraordinaire, scientist and professorial lecturer in the Archaeological Studies program of the University of the Philippines. He has been among the lead scientists in the discovery and excavation of the Maitum Caves in Mindanao, of the renewed exploration of the Tabon Caves in Palawan, the Human Origins Project in Southeast Asia, and human movements into the Batanes. He will talk to us about his experience in Bacong, Dumaguete. Hello, Dr. Dizon. Hello, Bong. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes, I miss interacting with archaeologists,
Yes.
and I miss conversations and discussions about dating and sites and hukay. So, as an archaeologist, you worked on many sites, but you have been working on a site in Bacong, in Dumaguete, for a couple
Yes,
of decades at least. No, during my time at the National Museum, we were
that's
already
right.
in Bacong. So,
Mhm.
what is this site, and what are its dates?
Well, Bacong turned out to be a very significant Metal Age site, perhaps from the period of about 500 BC to
Hmm.
1000. So it has a long occupation, but there are many sites within Bacong, which is a municipality of Negros Oriental and quite near to Dumaguete city, about 6 kilometers from Dumaguete. So Bacong, once it was reported to us, there were uh, jar burials that were bulldozed along
Oh,
the road uh, in 2010. That was when the first time we did a rescue archaeology at the time. Nevertheless, back in the 1980s, early 80s, some of these sites were worked by Karl Hatterer and his students. And even earlier, Rosa Tenazas, a retired archaeologist from the San Carlos University, did a lot of work on the site called Saruno site in Magsuhot, uh, Barangay Magsuhot in Bacong. From then on, we excavated a number of sites within this barangay and found out several indications of different metal age sites for a long tradition from tronconical, parang drum na jar burial,
mm.
and also some coffin shape rectangular jar burials made of all pottery and locally made, designed by people. And we did a lot of excavations and found evidences of many glass beads from various periods and perhaps from different sites that were brought to Bacong. Uh, as a metal age site, there were iron tools and implements, of course, and then there were also glass bangles found, some human remains which were preserved a little bit were also found inside these secondary jar burials. And interestingly, there were anthropomorphic figurines and design among the jar burials,
Mm.
and of different kinds of potteries, which of various size could have been placed one on top the other, signifying some kind of a stupa. Uh,
Oh.
yes, so Bacong could have been an early Hindu-Buddhistic site, although we found uh, some representatives of these kinds in Bacong. Even Rosa Pinasas found a stone seat, which is now in the University Museum of San Carlos, but never able to identify it, suggesting Hindu gods like Brahman, Shiva, and some deities. It was carved within those stones, but it was only identified like a seat of barangay chieftain there.
But
So,
yeah, but Bong,
yes,
if the date is Metal Age, what years would those be again, please?
between 500 BC and 1000 AD.
So were these people, if there was a community, if there were people doing this undertaking, I'm assuming that the pottery, the jars, and the secondary burial rectangular jar, which is a beautiful thing, I've seen it. Would these people have been making them, and would they be part of the Austronesian speakers movement, or would they be people who antedated the Austronesian speakers who came over from Taiwan, as you and Dr. Bellwood posited?
Well, they are actually Austronesian speaking people by this time who have migrated from north to south, and Bacong was chosen so that many people did not know that there were big communities in Bacong. They locally manufactured these jars. We can see some impression of mats under the jar, and they were poorly fired, very coarse pottery. But the some uh, uh, pots are quite decorated and suggesting the symbol of Austronesian and Sahuin Kalanai people, uh, which are indicated on the scroll S designs of some pottery that were found in Bacong. And definitely Metal Age, the whole range of Metal Age, which they identified before, archaeologically, what is it historically and socially? I would say that this is a part of the big Srivijayan Empire, where Philippines was just an entrepot or a satellite site and never really matured the way Srivijayan sites matured in Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia. Uh, Having our island very archipelagic, I think they just passed here. So from the chronology that I reconstruct, I can see that from Maitum, for example, which you know, which have a
Mhm.
date of 5 BC to AD 370, uh, after this, there were indications of communities that survive in Mindanao, in Seleman, Lebak, Cotabato. These are the limestone urns, also used as secondary burials, and they did also have some anthropomorphic pottery in them.
Would that
After,
be the same lineage?
perhaps it's the same kind of culture that were there. Definitely, again, they spoke the Austronesian language. And from Seleman Lebak, the other early sites which would be is Bacong, Negros Oriental. So they may have skipped a little bit of Butuan, which we know also existed in the 9th century AD. And that's why they are all still in the lineage of the Metal Age period. Although there were contacts definitely by the Hindu Buddhistic travelers. Uh, of course, we know the classic Shiva temple in Prambanan, Indonesia. And in the Philippines, they were not able to construct temples. Instead, they may have used potteries to represent symbolically these temples. And these are the findings in Bacong. So that is how significant Bacong is. Before, we did not know anything about this, and even during the time of Hatterer and Tenasas, so it was plainly made like an Iron Age site. And the symbolism attached in that particular period of the Iron Age was not really revealed in the early times of archaeology in Bacong.
One question, but does
Yes.
Bacong have the source? Do they have to travel far to get the clay? Is there a local source of the clay to indicate that it was easily available? And also that, apart from specialists who made jar burials, therefore the pottery tradition was very strong. Is that the conclusion we can draw?
Yes, there are available clay in Bacong that would match this kind of discoveries. There were already analyses done by another American student to compare the raw material clay and the jar burial clay. So that is easily available. And what is important in Bacong also is the Mount Talinis, Cuernos de Negros, which is well probably represented symbolically in these potteries. There was like an M figure in one of the best represented rectangular pottery secondary jar burial, and which suggests that kind of environment in Bacong. So there is no problem for the kind of manufacture of locally made pottery in Bacong.
Just for the information of the listener, MusKKat is coming out with a book on Philippine bladed weapons, and Dr. Dizon was one of the authors. He wrote about the metal part of the weaponry. And would there be any sort, or what we have in the book are later models? But in the sites in Bacong, let's say Magsuhot, were there any weaponry, any blades, other metal implements, iron tools that were found?
Yes, we have a number of spearheads, for example,
Oh,
and then
nice.
and bolos or pointed bolos and square edge bolos that were found, and also some chisels, which
Ah,
could have been used for both buildings and
mm,
many carvings of wood. So these are found in Bacong. In fact, one site could have been a sort of a ritual site with a number of spearheads found in one location.
has there been a publication of the finds, or do you have next steps? Do you need to excavate more, or is this a point in time where an analysis and a publication can be done about the research? I know that Dr. Juncker of University of Illinois, Laura, also worked in Bacong, no? And so is
Yes.
there any plan to have a sort of macro publication to cover this?
Well, of course, we archaeologists always have planned to publish everything that we have. At the moment, what I have is a storyline of Bacong that which would serve like an outline of whatever is in there. In fact, one of the students of Dr. Laura Jonker had a dissertation made on some of the materials and site location analysis in
Mhm.
Bacong. What we observe, in fact, from the jar burial practices is that the higher you go, the better and more beautiful the jar burials appear. It means to say that there may be some kind of a chiefdom and a social complexity already involved in Bacong on the status of those who were buried in these secondary burials. So from the lower ground, you just see plain and simple jar burials. But going all along up the hills, you get a better decorated jar burials and increasing number of beads and metals. So these are some evidences which would suggest a kind of social stratification within Bacong. And what we want to see also are the habitation site. Now we
Mm.
know from the burials, we can reconstruct this kind of uh, social stratification in Bacong, but we see how people live simply in their houses. And there are some evidences of post holes and other kinds of archaeological debris or artifacts found on the lower ledges of the mountains, suggesting houses. But we want to explore more. Bacong is really so rich in archaeological site, and perhaps the other municipalities which we don't have any time to work there. But we get reports every now and then from like Valencia, that is
Mhm.
another municipality near Bacong, and another one near the beach. But from the ground level, the present ground level, there are indications also of the contact period site with a number of porcelains dating
Mm.
from the Ming Dynasty. So you
Oh.
can see the continuous occupation in Bacong from the Metal Age about 500 BC to maybe 1000, and then you see these trade materials, particularly porcelain, from the lower, like, let's say, I divided 100 meters elevation, 200 meters elevation, and 300 meters elevation. So in the 100-meter elevation, that's where you find some habitation site. And 200 meters are already the jar burials, and up to 300 meters, suggesting the kind of decorations and complexity within those jars.
Mhm. But you are a specialist in the Metal Age.
Mm.
What are the settled characteristics of Metal Age in the Philippines? I mean, what are the traits and characteristics as derived from archaeological sites that you have worked on?
The Metal Age people are a group of peoples which have social complexity, as I mentioned, meaning to say they have a kind of social stratification within them. The leaders may have the best materials that they have, and iron or tools, which in the Philippine traditions were actually used mainly as everyday tool, but they can be used as weapons. And so looking at the jar burials, if somebody buried there have this kind of iron, he must be on a very high status, because iron is very rare and very expensive at the time. It could be more expensive than gold, in fact, because of its use utilitarian properties. Uh, they can make blades out of iron, but not gold. Gold is just very soft metal, and it's almost useless for an everyday implement of an ordinary people, and even among the high status people who may have the luxury of having spears. But spears, they can also be used for hunting, not necessarily for war. Again, there are always dual utility from these kinds of iron. Unlike in many other cultures, like the Roman Empire, they have swords, particularly used for wars. But in the Philippines, you don't actually see sword, but mainly the everyday tool. I can see from your collection, it was very late when the blades became longer. Most of the blades in the archaeological finds are up to 50 centimeters only. And once you have almost a meter, that is a very big sword or tool. Uh, sword you cannot use for everyday tool. There is no flexibility in doing chopping or anything, having a sword because they are so long. So you have a knife instead. That's why even in the early period, like the Roman Empire, they have sword and knives and then spears. So these are particularly characteristics of the Metal Age period. Uh, War, for example, invasion in Europe and in India, in China, that is the same all over. You have warfare material and you have uniformity of the blades that you see in China, in India, or in Europe, like in the Roman Empire. They were provided by the state, and that we lack in the Philippines. So that's why we were only in the realm of chiefdom during the Metal Age, while the others, they were already in their statehood. But most of them have this kind of cultural and social evolution or development. Uh, and of course, the number of people is also involved. You can estimate in the Roman state, they were about 10 to 15,000 people. But in Bacong, you may only have at least 100 or 200. So not enough to build a soldier or an army to do some kind of invasion or colonization. This is the difference in Southeast Asia in terms of archaeology. Uh, there are the state formation could have been just secondary and it's not primary. That's why you have a very limited supply of irons or other tools that we observe in the archaeology.
Bong, just to go back before, before the blades, of course, we had adzes and little axes. Did the production and use of, let's say, adzes? Do we have metal adzes in any collection? Not exactly from Bacong, or the adzes are normally of there's a shell adze. I know that Bayer had the jade adze, and did they stop producing adzes for as a utilitarian weapon? Tool as an implement.
Yes, that's right. From the even late Neolithic, the adzes, stone adzes, were quite popular or available. But later on, in Bacong particularly, we found chisels. The way I have analyzed chisel from many sites from Cebu that were collected by Carl Gutte in the 1920s. So chisel replaced the adzes because it can do the better work in carving, like a log of wood for to be made into a boat. So that's how they disappeared. I think the utilitarian function were made available in iron and a better, harder tool to carve wood than stone.
I see. Well, I think we've covered just about what we wanted to do in the beginning, but let me ask you, what are your plans as an archaeologist? What next? What is your next? Are you continuing Bacong, or is there another site? Of course, you cannot tell the name of the site or the place because, that's for security purposes, but what next for you?
Well, I am retired now completely from the National Museum, so I
Yes.
don't work. But I am invited by a colleague, Laura Jonker, who would have some kind of funding to continue Bacong. The mayor in Bacong is very excited, Mayor
Alviola.
Alviola.
Yes.
Yes, and he is prepared to put some funding. He has always been a big help
Mm-hmm.
to us since
Yes.
2010. And even if he was not the mayor, the wife became the mayor. The complete support was there for archaeology. Yeah, but that the mayor, I think, would still want to have the materials in Bacong because it's his municipality.
But you're retired, but not really retired because you lecture in the archaeological studies program still. And is there any text that you are at present actively writing?
I am reviewing books, and I have some articles that I need to revise and send to some journals or chapter of a book. There is one chapter which is now approved by Oxford University Press and the university, which is edited by Charles Hyam and Kim Nam. And
Mm-hmm.
I have a chapter of Philippine prehistory in this big volume on the archaeology of Southeast Asia, I think. Yeah.
And you still lecture in the ASP. That's very good. Thank you very much for that exciting narration of the Metal Age, of pottery, of community. We hope that this was only the first of our conversations. Usapan with you, Dr. Dizon. There should be more.
Yeah, sure. With as you wish, you can invite me. Talk any topic that you are interested in and that I know of. It's okay.
Okay, thank you very much and have a good morning and a good weekend. Thank you,
You're
Bong.
welcome. You're welcome.